Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today. Chapter 1454 The World is Her Theater. Leo came out of his space to let Lotus mount, while Ophelia and Tessa came out of the tiny world with Naksha to join the defense team, in case anything broke through. Then Thor showed up in behemoth form, absolutely enormous at mythic rank, and shaking the ground with every step on the soft ground. What the hell is that? Behemoth. An impenetrable bulwark behemoth, to be specific. He's gotten a few good opportunities and he's reached mythic rank. But you should see how impressive his bulwark spell is at this point. Carl joked. Thor nodded as he brought up a bulwark, barrier 100 meters wide, blocking the whole side of the battlefield from the advancing beasts. Damn, that's a defensive barrier. If I had known that there were mythic rank behemoths around, I would have tried to recruit one before now. The leader of the local guards muttered as he prepared to join the battle. Carl leapt over the barrier, transforming as he did. The body of a world dragon was much better suited to fighting the 20-meter-long crocolisks, and as long as he wasn't flying they should keep coming for him. The other dragons laughed as they transformed and flew after him. Carl was splashing through the swamp, drawing as much attention as possible. It was a clear threat and provocation to the crocs, but none of the dragons believed there was even a slim chance that the monsters wouldn't continue the attack. It didn't matter to them how powerful Carl felt. They were still at the same rank. Even if he was rated as a dungeon boss, according to the system, you could take out a boss with a 10-person group, and there was strength in numbers for beasts as well. The first of the crocolisks roared as it charged Carl, only 4 brutal pugilist, shatter, sharpness, and crushing blows to all activate at the same time as Carl smashed its head with a massive paw. The strike wasn't enough to kill the beast, even with Chaos Blast coating his claws, but Carl didn't give the crocolisk another chance to attack, and Sharp Claws decapitated it while it was still stunned. Then, Carl called for a full set of golems and the Haint, who was happily brandishing the Sword of Champions in her long clawed fingers. Flickering around the battlefield, she stabbed deep into the skulls of the crocolisks and rode them like a rodeo bull as she siphoned off their life essence to grow her own power and feed Carl's advancement. Not even Ray could find fault with a strategy so brilliantly entertaining. The spider was hunting the leader of the crocolisks, killing anything that she came across on the way, but so far, there was no sign of the real threat. Carl twisted to avoid having his tail bitten, and tried to ignore the feeling of small feet on his back, as Opal transformed into a butterfly-winged humanoid to join the battle directly. Well, join the battle might be overstating her intentions, but she had created an illusionary domain, and summoned gargoyles to stage dramatic fights with the giant monsters, while she cheered and shouted positioning directions from her spot atop his back. Carl caught a tail swat that was aimed at the enthusiastic butterfly and tossed the croc over his head as it twisted and tried to bite at her. It must have realized that the extra gargoyles and the change to the swamp were her doing, and it was determined to turn her into a snack. Force Slam hit the crocolisk in the face before it could get to Opal, and the butterfly gave it a dismissive wave of her hand. She had no time for its theatrics, it was getting in the way of her show. She's a more dramatic, less emo version of young Ray. Thor joked as Opal planned out the moves to the next encounter in advance. You have no sense of theatrics. Don't I do a wonderful job of making the tales of Thor the Mighty? You have a point. Carry on. Remy, with her bodyguards, had set up just behind Thor's bulwark, and she was forming a storm over the swamp, not fire, as the people who lived off the land were watching, but a thunderstorm, with a small side of meteors. If anything got close, they could hit it with lightning, but they had sent nearly everyone forward, and the town guards looked like they might pass out at any moment, even with Lotus doing her healing tree impression by the gates. They had switched positions and now Lotus was on the ground, with Leo floating above her head, while the locals stared at the strange turtle and tried to determine just what species it was. That false island giant turtle wasn't native to the Dragon Isles, after all. Should we send teams to help them? I feel bad standing here while they fight close enough for us to see. But the mayor hasn't ordered us to deploy, and they're outside the engagement range. One of the myths on the team asked. Just hold for now. If they look like they're getting tired or struggling, we will go out. But did I just see that dragon beat a crocolisk with another crocolisk? Leo laughed at the incredulous tone in the man's voice. Indeed, Carl had used a dying crocolisk as a club. However, Sister Opal was the one that was making things fun to watch. She was marshalling troops like a theater director, guiding everyone's summoned constructs into a deadly clash with the beasts in the most dramatic possible fashion. She had given up on using Carl as a platform, and she was flying over the battlefield, warping reality into her own private show. The effects of reality warp and illusionary domain together were too much for the simple minds of the crocolisks to fathom, and the entire battle was firmly under her control. Everything except one factor. They still hadn't managed to find the creature that was coordinating the attacks, despite Ray's most diligent investigations. Chapter 1455 Awakened Leader. As everyone was learning, Opal was incredibly powerful when she put her mind to something. While she was burning through a truly stupendous amount of mana to keep up her show, the tides of gargoyles and golems that she was willing to unleash on the enemy had turned the battlefield into a charnel house. As fast as they could charge into combat, the crocolisks were falling before the might of Opal's illusionary armies. The dragons could only stare in shock at the gossamer winged child hovering in the sky, glowing with pure power as hundreds died to a simple wave of her hand. But that wasn't the terrifying part. No, the true terror was how unconcerned she was. It wasn't a struggle, there was no emotional attachment, no anger at being attacked. They died simply because Opal wanted a show, and what Opal wanted, she received. Opal's show was so intense that she was draining her space dry of mana, even with both her own prodigious mana regeneration and Carl refilling it for her, as he fought mostly with passive skills and the massive size of a behemoth-enhanced world dragon body. Their power shone like a beacon in the sky, and Carl felt the instant that an ancient awareness was drawn from its slumber. The leader of the crocolisks had awakened. The air seemed to warp, and all of Opal's illusions shattered as a massive portal opened, and an immortal rank octopus appeared from the void. Who dares to challenge my authority here? Carl flapped his wings, rising above the battle to face the challenger. Your filthy pets disturbed my travels. You owe me compensation. The immortal monster looked somehow offended at Carl's words. The patterns on its flesh shifting to a deep crimson before fading to a deep blue. You again. You owe me for the death of Oobleck. Though, I didn't know that you wanted a share. We roasted him as a snack, but there is some calamari left. The dragons simply stared at Carl, astounded by his audacity. What level of insanity did you have to reach before you told an immortal rank monster that you turned his friend into calamari? Confidence didn't cover that, it could only be a level of pathological insanity. The octopus didn't hold back, and it launched an all-out attack on Carl, tearing apart reality around him with what appeared to be dozens of small black holes that swallowed everything they came in contact with. Power burst from Carl, and the black holes faded as mana suppression, under the effects of a nearly perfect understanding of mana manipulation, stole the power to keep them active. Then, Ray joined the battle, her forelegs tearing into the octopus while it was distracted by Carl. Before the beast could react, she was already gone, and it was left bleeding. The damage wasn't high, not with the immortal blessing reducing the damage it took from her. But the wounds weren't healing. The spell detonated around the octopus as most of his attention was focused on mana suppression, to keep the black holes from fully forming. A tentacle lashed out, adding physical attacks to the magical stalemate. But Carl's body came equipped for exactly this battle. Dragon claws easily tore the flesh of the tentacle, and the octopus howled in pain even as it wrapped one of Carl's forelegs. Then, the haint attacked from above, burying the blade of champions in its soft flesh to the hilt. There was a blind spot at the top of its head, one that the haint had exploited, and it could only whip at the area with a tentacle, though it knew that the attacker was already gone. Then, Ray was back, and Kara was hurling chaos blasts at its beak from below. Too late, it realized why Carl hadn't backed away. With 3 of its tentacles occupied dealing with the dragon, there was a large portion of its body undefended, and the flying badger knew just where to hit. Dana charged into combat, letting auto parry defend against tentacles, so her blade could hurl attacks into the immortal. Silently, Dana bemoaned the fact that the skill names of her class were not at all intimidating. Plum Blossom Slash was incredibly effective, but hardly the sort of skill name that invoked fear in others. Nor was Willow's Caress or Lotus Blossom Flash, an explosion-type skill. Her epic golems, the Dark Elven Kings, joined them in the air, laughing as Dana's shared auto-parry made it impossible for the immortal to hit them. They were too fast, and the creature was besieged on too many fronts. With mana suppressed around it, the creature was rapidly depleting its own stores, even though its skills had been rendered nearly ineffective. However, it had been born an immortal, and it had yet to master a fundamental rule. There wasn't much that it could do to protect itself. Flee. It had to flee. Unfortunately, it was entangled with the world dragon, and it couldn't shift between planes as long as it was restrained. Dozens of new wounds appeared on its body as the immortal focused entirely. on Carl, trying to break free of his grasp so that it could escape. As long as it survived today, nothing else mattered. It just had to escape. Inky darkness filled the battlefield. A combination of magic and actual ink. It was the last resort defensive measure of the blue ring immortal octopus, and Carl felt his limbs going numb. He couldn't tell if the octopus was still in his grasp, or even if it was still attacking him. He could see its soul, he knew where it was, but he was detached from the battle, unable to effectively attack in a physical sense. It was also a neurotoxic gas, not purely magic, and mana suppression didn't completely dampen the effect. Undeterred, Carl raked his claws down the front of the creature, and then frowned as the soul's signature faded. Surely it hadn't died? Not that easily. Chapter 1456 Class Skills Neglected. Slowly, the black mist faded, and Carl found himself alone on the battlefield again. Dana had retreated, escaping the blinding attack, while the Haint had returned to the ground to help Kara clear the last of the crocolisks with Opal. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. They will be asking for replays of this battle for centuries. The butterfly shouted as Carl came back into view. Carl smiled at her. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Now, what is the situation? Nearly out of reptiles, and the octopus escaped to the immortal realm. I felt the change in mana as it fled. Opal explained. Rack? I'm here. I couldn't trap it when it tried to leave. Its power just cut through my spells. That hadn't been Carl's concern. He was more worried that she had found a way to follow it into another realm. That would have been problematic. Though he might be able to go there and get her back now that he had been exposed to the immortal realm, and had the Planeswalker class skill that allowed him to portal between adjacent realms that he was familiar with. Technically, he hadn't purchased it yet, but it was there and he had the points if he needed them. Carl took a moment to scan through his class skills, reminding himself that he really should start spending some of the skill points he had accumulated. There were 5 left that he could put points into, one of which appeared to be a virtually limitless point sink. Destructive Beast Master 0 points invested. Increases Bonded Beast skill power by 1% per point invested. Invulnerable Beast Master 20 points invested. Increases Bonded Beast damage reduction by 1% per point invested, up to 20%. Blessing of Skill creates 1 random skill. Cost varies based on rarity. 1 point for common skills, 5 for rare skills, 25 for epic skills, 50 for artifact grade skills, 500 for legendary skills. Blessing of Family 50 points. Creates 1 additional beast space. Planeswalker World Dragon Patron exclusive skill. 100 points. Allows portals to open between adjacent realms the user is familiar with. Planeswalker would be useful if he had to retrieve one of his team members, but the others were no less valuable. Who could say no to another beast space? Or to the direct damage bonus? But it was the Blessing of Skill ability that was the truly overlooked bonus of his class. He had been putting it off as he had thought he might need the skill points in an emergency, but at this point, he had accumulated far more than he could possibly need for a mere emergency. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Ray asked. That we skip everything else and get a legendary skill? Kara asked hopefully. We don't have 500 points. Thor noted helpfully. The answer is obviously to get 100 rare skills before you get a legendary skill. Leo suggested. Kara laughed. That would be chaos in its own right. Especially if they started teaching them all to the blue dragons. 100 random skills would keep them busy for a lifetime. It's too bad that we can't theme them. If we could pick a skill that the system thought would be good for a specific person, it would be so much more fun to see what it gave us. Kara added. Ray's mental thought derailed them all. Shouldn't we see if we can just add 500 points to damage first? 500% more damage would be way more fun than a bunch of random skills. It didn't specifically list a cap, so it might not stop at 20% like the damage reduction skill did. 5 times a stabby would basically negate the advantage that higher ranks had over her, and everything at or under her rank would just pop like a balloon when she poked it. The others weren't as enthusiastic about the idea. Sure, it would be a huge buff when they were fighting, but they weren't always fighting, and the right skill could make all the other times more fun too. The clear winner in Tion's mind was that they needed 1600 points so they could just do all the things at once. He didn't really care which option won, as they were all viable options. But if everyone was happy, that was surely best. Brother Thor taught him that. Dana's laughter made the dragons turn to look at them, thinking that the stress might have caused her to snap. Sorry. The mental link with my people got off topic. How are things looking in the city? Did we get the whole attack on this side? She asked, diverting their curiosity. We did. All the crocs in the area came for us, but there are likely more spread out all through the swamps. The number that we killed here doesn't seem to be high enough to be all the ones that were left from the invasion. Excellent work on the immortal, even if it did manage to escape at the end. You don't get to be an old immortal without having a way to save your own life when things get tough. Prince Nathan replied. Dana smiled. I've heard that before. I don't think it applies to only immortals, though. Should we return to give the good news to the city? Or do you think that they've already seen enough to be sure? The dragon snorted a huff of black mist. With the nature priestess there? They've likely gotten the whole thing narrated like a sporting event. That girl has energy levels like a light switch. She's going at full output until she crashes, and the lights go out. Carl patted the man on the back. So, you've begun to understand how nature priestesses work. It's all about the timing. You need to keep them operating when it's time for them to help out. Not that they don't want to, but they operate on their own rhythm. Ray transformed to stand next to them. But they definitely want to help. They will help so much that you will have to ask them to stop. Chapter 1457, Who's Counting? They were not wrong about the situation in the city. Lotus had been narrating the entire battle, with help from a set of projection illusions created by Opal to help her follow the situation. Sister Ari, what is the count? We have wagers to settle. Lotus shouted the moment that she saw the team returning to the city. Ray, Shadow stepped under Leo, and handed Lotus a piece of paper with a set of numbers on it. I didn't count anyone else's, so I don't know how the final score looks. It's a shame that the octopus escaped, though. I could have had a definitive win if it had tried to run. She replied grumpily. Lotus laughed and hopped back up on Leo's back, now that she was in human form again, then sat cross-legged and placed healing totems on top of all 4 of his flippers. The turtle floated happily around the city gates as Lotus waved everyone over. If you've got a wager going, bring your numbers to me. On the honor of the clergy, I will report the results exactly as you have presented them to me. She was shouting. The city guards tried not to laugh at her enthusiastic response to the battle, or the fact that everyone was writing kill counts on sheets. It wasn't hard, they were all mythic, the crocolisks were all mythic. So, it was a simple 2 points per kill. Alright, we have our scores. Who is ready for the results? The dragons cheered, and Lotus waved a paper over her head. In first place, with 408 points, we have Sister Ray. In second place, with 380 points, plus a bonus for pure dramatic style, we have Opal. In third place, with 364 points, we have the Dana Mage. In fourth place, ever so close to a podium finish, with 360 points, we have Prince Nathan. The dragons cheered as their representative managed to get at least an honorable mention from the Darklight host's massively overpowered combat team. It hadn't escaped anyone's notice that the longer they fought, the larger the cumulative bonus the Darklight host members were getting became. I am beginning to suspect that the Supreme Lady might have been justified in looking down on us. What sort of combat power even is that? One of the guards complained. Some of it is just gear advantage. We're a crafting guild, so naturally our combat members have the very best of the best gear. All epic grade, all mythic rank, and most of it custom-made to suit the members. Lotus informed him. So, you're saying that our commanders could fight like that if they just had the budget to get the good gear? Lotus covered her mouth, ineffectually hiding her giggles. I wouldn't go that far. They've all got advanced classes, rare and epic grade combat skills, synergistic buffs, and a load of experience. We've been in Xylaz for quite a while now, building up our combat skills at the dungeons. As it turns out, if you have motivated members, you can go to a different one every day of the week. Lotus joked. Mostly, she got invited every day because she was a healer, and there were never enough healers. Though, she was only chosen first if it was a large team raid. If it was a 5-person dungeon, they usually asked Thor and Tessa so they would get a tank and healer pair together. Though, Thor was mythic now, and that messed up their whole dynamic again like it had when Tessa was still an overlord. Their dungeon romance was doomed to hard times, it seemed. While the kill count is impressive, I have a few questions that I hope someone can answer. Like, how was there still an immortal rank invader hiding here? Why wasn't it detected and taken out? Did we try and fail? Was one of our immortals injured in the process? The questions from the guard captain brought everyone back on topic, while Prince Nathan shook his head. None of the immortals has been injured. At least not severely. They are all busy with dozens of attacks, especially on the other continents, where they don't have immortal defenders. That has kept them working every waking hour, from what I've heard. So, they might just be too busy to be scouring the planet for hiding. Cephalopods. The captain breathed a sigh of relief. Well, when you put it that way, it's not nearly as concerning. No need to tell him that Matilda is busy in the immortal realms now that she's advanced to legendary status. They're throwing her parties and trying to curry favor, so she's likely distracted by all the groveling and not paying close attention to sneaky invaders. Kara noted. Fortunately, that means there is a chance that we get peak-grade ingredients for our kitchens. If we can catch another of those octopus monsters, we can definitely eat well for the foreseeable future. Carl added, hoping to calm the guards. Another? You killed one already? The captain asked. As you saw, we don't have any trouble defeating them in a fight. The problem is keeping them from escaping. They've all had incredibly well-prepared escape plans, and they are not to be underestimated as far as intelligence goes. The fact that they don't speak doesn't mean that they lack the brain power. Got it. We didn't know that there was one at this attack. We had thought that it was entirely the crocolisks, until your arrival chased that creature out of hiding. Who knows how much damage it could have done if you hadn't teamed up on it. Don't underestimate yourselves. Desperation drives men to extreme lengths, and I'm certain that the guard detachment would have found a way to deal with it, even if you didn't have specialists on hand. You held out this long against the real threat, and you're in the perfect terrain for them, too. Some of the arrivals have been horribly suited to their environment, but these are right at home. I would say that you've had it as hard or harder than any of the other sites we've seen. Prince Nathan smiled grimly. Certainly harder than the sites that got frogs in the mountains. Not that they had it easy, but the cold weather and terrain didn't let the beasts fight as well as they would have hoped. Chapter 1458 Relax and Sit. The city guards were beginning to relax now that they knew the boss of the monsters, as well as most of the threat, had been eliminated. But it was not nearly enough. They were all still exhausted from days of being kept on edge, while Carl's group was freshly rested when the fight started, though some might have been a touch hungover. Why don't you all take a break, and we will watch the city for a few hours. We've got enough that we can spread out along the walls and watch for incoming fights. It might even lure out a few more of the beasts, though I suspect that with their leader gone, they will become less aggressive and more territorial. That's closer to their usual nature, Carl suggested. Prince Nathan frowned. Was that not supposed to be his line? Sure, they were at a border city, but it was still on the Gathuzan side of the border. These were his people, and it was his duty to care for them, while the Darklight host didn't even have a branch office on this island. I will call for a regiment to relieve the city guard. The attacks are dying down now, and I am certain that Father can spare at least one force to relieve the city guard here for a few days while they recover. He insisted. The guards looked overjoyed at that news, and immediately started to spread the good news that they were going to be relieved, and could finally sleep. Not just a nap between shifts but proper sleep all night long. If the army takes some time to get here, my team can help watch the city. Lady Ray is happy to scout for fresh sources of leather approaching the walls, and if we give her a coffee and a cupcake, I'm certain that Sister Lotus will take over the arduous task of greeting everyone who wants to pass through this gate. Lotus laughed at the thought. Of course she would take over gate guard duty. Everyone here was so nice, and they even brought her snacks as a reward for healing. They knew what nature priestesses liked. Are you sure that it's not too much trouble? It will probably be at least 4 hours before a team will get here. Prince Nathan replied. Ray wrapped a companionable arm around his shoulders. My dear prince, of course it's not a problem. Looking out for the little guy is what we do. Besides, I'm not nearly as well stocked with crocolisk leather as I had hoped to be. They're surprisingly difficult to come by, and now that I've announced to the other tailors that I have some, I'm swamped with orders. Nathan nodded slowly. And just how many tailors does the Darklight host have? Well, I would say about 50 if you include the spiders who specialize in actually making silk. But the tailors are higher in number, while being only a small portion of the actual revenue source. They're mostly to keep everyone properly dressed, with a side of fashion for sale. Ray explained. And there are other crafts, right? You did have all those accessories for sale. Ray smiled. Oh, we've got all sorts. Blacksmiths, runecrafters, alchemists, mystic cooks, sculptors. If it involves making things, we've probably got someone working on gaining the skill. That sounds very different from what I have heard about the Darklight host. The Dragon Prince informed her. It's best to keep them guessing. You should know that we're a very chaos-friendly guild. We might show up to rescue your city with an invincible combat team. We might steal your girl and make her mythic rank lingerie and a custom wedding ring. The prince and the guards tried and failed to restrain their laughter, but deep down, they knew that Ray wasn't kidding. They just didn't understand that when she said that she would steal your girl, she meant it in the most literal way. As in, literally take her, willing or not. One of the other shadow dragons tossed a caramel candy at Lotus and laughed. If there is a more chaos-attuned guild in the world than the Darklight host, I would be surprised. I heard from the grapevine that the only reason your guild doesn't hold open markets in every major city is because there is a membership cap, and you can't get any more crafters. Ray rolled her eyes. I'm sure we could work around that. The problem is that Immortal Regent Azof gets all cranky when we come up with the best ideas. The prince almost choked at the annoyed and irreverent tone that Ray used to speak of the Immortal Regent. The man had been a living legend guiding the Dragon Isles for at least 2 resurgences now. But the spider did not care at all, and only saw his interference as a way to ruin her fun. Send the guards home, we will take over protection duties. Gentlemen, you can stay in dragon form if you prefer. It will help the city see that someone is on the walls looking out for them. Prince Nathan insisted, pulling them back on topic. We will take this wall. Carl and Dana can take the other side so that everyone is between one of the two beast groups. Kara suggested. That would give Carl and Dana a bit of privacy if nothing happened. But it would also let her nap on top of Thor's head while Ray hunted. It was a brilliant plan. We've both got golems available, so we can watch a wall with just the two of us. With the beasts on this side, they should be pretty good as well, so everyone can just spread out wherever you find a comfortable perch. Carl added. You heard the man. Relieve the guards and settle in for afternoon watch. I will try to get the army here as fast as I can. Just in time. I can sense Crocs beginning to move. Ray mentally whispered. Half a second before she vanished on a hunting trip. Chapter 1459. 1 Croc, 2 Croc. Carl led Dana to the far wall of the city as the team spread out, replacing the guards, who were eagerly awaiting their relief teams, though they all looked half dead. Sometimes in the literal sense. They had been healed, but Carl saw that many had damaged auras, marking damage to their life force or possibly their minds after the battle. They were mostly overlords and totems, so a prolonged fight against monsters above their rank had been more than they could take, and now all that they wanted was to hide in bed for a week and forget it had ever happened. That was perfect for Carl and Dana, as it let them send out the Dark Elven Kings to patrol the wall, while the lesser golems and the epic guards assisted. There was nobody else along that side of town until a few more dragons arrived to settle in for a rest, so they could spend a bit of quality time together, just relaxing with nothing to do but wait, and laugh at Ray's mental narrative as she hunted crocolisks. 1 Croc, 2 Croc. Red Croc, Blue Croc. She sang as she made her way through the swamp. Oh, look at that one, the patterning, those muscles. What an absolute beauty. I'm going to grab its tail. For a moment, Carl wondered if the stress had finally gotten to her, then realized that she was quoting a television show from the Golden Dragon Nation. But she did still grab its tail. There weren't many crocolisks left in the area. They had spread out, or had gone into hiding when their master was killed. But she was still finding enough to keep her busy, and to keep the city clear. However, Carl's group were the only ones aware that not everyone from the team was on the wall, and the rest of them simply thought that there were no further attacks by the crocolisks after the main battle ended. They couldn't see the threat, and they didn't have Kara using chaotic foresight to try to guess where the next challenger would appear. She had horrible accuracy, and most of her visions were of other continents or other centuries. But every now and then she would see things happening around them. Ray just had to watch the sense of the others, and when their thoughts registered a threat, she could shadow step to the location and hunt it. That greatly increased her hunting efficiency with the team spread to both sides of the city, but it was a shame that Carl was in cat demon form and not in dragon form, where he would be large enough to see further. His priorities were all wrong, and he was just cuddling with his Dana mage instead of helping her hunt. I can see far enough. I'm looking in the right direction. Carl countered. But you're not even paying attention. How are you supposed to give good warnings? Carl pulled Dana onto his lap, facing him. Fine. Now I'm more focused on the appropriate direction. Ray laughed at his loophole attempt. Now he was paying very little attention to the battlefield at all, especially after Dana started to kiss at his neck. But she could hear the updates from the Dark Elven Kings to Carl, and they were actually eager to see the crocolisks continue the attack, so they were paying close attention to anything that moved in the distance. However, it was Dana that noticed when the army reinforcements arrived, as they opened a portal in the middle of town and marched 50 mythic rank warriors through, with a pair of clerics taking up the rear of the convoy. You can get your hands out of my shirt now. The army is here to take over our position. She whispered in Carl's ear, taking advantage of the sensitivity of the enhanced form. Good plan. There are far better places to put my hands. But first, I suppose that we should find a room. It's only polite, after all. Dana laughed as she wrapped her legs around his waist. Carry me over to the reinforcements. The commander of the relief force laughed as he saw a large cat demon step through a portal with a fox-eared girl wrapped around his waist. They seemed much less concerned about danger than he had been led to believe should be the case for the area, but in most cases that confidence came from a level of lethality that was far beyond whatever the threat was. You must be the avatar of the world dragon. The palace steward said that we would meet one named Carl here. The commander announced. That's me, and this is my Dana mage. If I put her down, she will get distracted and run away to help people. Dana laughed as Carl squeezed her backside, and the dragon chuckled softly. It's a hard life. Newlyweds, I take it. It's been a few months now, but yes. But down to business. Our team and the dragons who have been hunting survivors of the invasion with us have taken positions along the wall, as the local city guard are exhausted from the siege. We drove off an immortal ranked threat earlier, but did not manage to kill it. I don't know if it will be back. The crocolisk numbers are much lower than they were, but we haven't found them all, and they are almost certain to continue attacking anything that leaves the city. Other than that, the situation is much less dire than it was a few hours ago. Prince Nathan called your unit to assist the city guards. as they're going to need more than one shift to be back up to operational capacity. Carl elaborated. So that is the situation. How are their losses? Carl shrugged. You would have to ask the nature priestess, I forgot to ask. They haven't suffered any since we arrived, but we've only been here a few hours now, and the latest attack didn't reach the city walls. Chapter 1460 Hustling. Letting the commander deal with Lotus instead was a brilliant move, Carl decided. The nature priestess was asleep on top of Leo, who was sunning his shell as he floated above the walls. But the moment that the commander cleared his throat to get her attention, and Leo wobbled to wake her up, Lotus was right on top of the battle report. Her retelling involved dramatic hand gestures, props, and even a musical interlude. The commander of the relief force was so stunned by the nature priestess's way of describing the battle that it took him half a minute to process it and come up with a suitable response. Are you perhaps trying to progress onto a bard class path? He finally asked. Bard? Oh no, that's not for me. I just like story time. It really was an incredible battle to observe. I didn't have much to do in my position as healer once the local guards were all patched up, so I just waited and watched. Now, if you're going to take over the positions on the walls, there are snacks calling my name, and I need my trusty turtle to help me access them. Leo laughed as he moved Lotus back to the tiny world. There had to be an easier way than having the beasts move her in and out, but Lotus couldn't teleport, so unless they opened a full-sized access at her location, he couldn't think of one. Where did she go? The commander asked, realizing that he hadn't gotten to ask any real questions. Into a separate space. You can ask Carl. Dana suggested. The commander nodded. Avatar, sorry to bother you. Do you have an estimate on the remaining monster count? Or any other information on future attack patterns? The attackers spread over the entire swamp. I don't have the original attack size data, or a proper count of casualties since, but given what we removed in this battle, I suspect that the remaining number is less than 100, spread over the whole swamp. The longer we give it, the more likely they are to cluster and spread into territories, like any other mythic beast. They only remain hyper-aggressive as long as there is a greater being controlling them, and their controller has left the mortal realms entirely. Returning won't be easy with our immortals watching for intrusions, so the chances are that he won't try at all. And not just because he's likely terrified of being eaten. The commander gave his subordinates a relieved smile. That made this deployment sound much better. If they just needed to hold the city while the locals recovered, and didn't need to fend off a full-scale attack, it was close to a vacation compared to what they had expected. Ray returned, having found as many crocolisks as were going to be easily hunted. And Carl knew that it was nearly time to call their mission here finished. If you want to take over the guard duties, please send everyone else back to the front gate. We need to decide if we're spending the night here, or if we are going to move on to another city. He added. Of course. Though, I have heard that you are from the crafting branch of the Darklight host. Did your guild perhaps still have merchandise for sale? The commander asked hopefully. Carl patted him on the shoulder. Naturally. I should have thought of that. We can set up a small stall in the market somewhere. The number of items might be a bit low with all the recent events, but we've got some good stuff left. A young man rushed over and eagerly grabbed Carl's hands with a reverent look that made Dana giggle. No giving my husband the puppy eyes. She chided, which made the young man blush. Not like that, not like that. I'm the curator of the library, and I am told that the Darklight host sells skill books. Do you have any? Our library is a small one, and we don't get copies of all the new stuff that the big central libraries run by totems and myths do. The young blue dragon pleaded. Of course, we have skill books. We've got inscriptionists in our team. If they're for a blue dragon library, we could even loan you a few to copy and return, instead of blowing your budget buying them. Carl offered. The dragon made most undignified happy squeal, and Dana sighed. Come with me, I have copies of the books that you want. Carl, you can take care of the booth along with Ray and Remy. Carl let her carefully peel the librarian off him. Of course. I will make sure that everyone gets what they need before they head to the walls to relieve our team. And the locals, of course. We've got much more for overlords than we do for totems and myths. That high-end gear has seen overwhelming demand, and we have limited numbers of craftsmen that powerful. The commander laughed. Having more than one is already more than most crafting guilds can claim. But I get what you're saying. Most of what we need is not combat gear, it is support, function, and healing. We have dungeons to gear our mythic members from, even if it's not as well optimized as what you can likely create. If that's the case, we've got a wonderful stock. We've also got a fine selection of ladies' fashion, in case you want to send a gift home. The commander sighed. I can already feel my account balance beginning to cry. You just had to mention fashion, didn't you? Carl shrugged. We have an entire team devoted to it. What can I say, it sells very well, and we've got everything from casual wear to fancy gowns, bags, shoes, even stylish armor for the ladies. We started our crafting guild house in Drod, and the obsession demons are incredibly fashionable, less likely to spend their whole day in simple robes than the dragons are. The commander laughed and looked around the area, where half the locals were wearing simple robes and pants in their patron deity's colors. It was their usual casual wear. Don't worry, we have a full selection of colors, so you can keep honoring your patron, but with more flair. Rack informed them. Today would be another good sales day. Chapter 1461 Good Turnout. Carl was highly satisfied with the turnout once they set up their stall in what appeared to be an empty former furniture store. There were still pricing signs for sofas and beds hung on the walls, but the store itself was empty, so Carl had set out cabinets from the guild storage to create a proper store for customers to come visit. You know we're only here for the day, right? Prince Nathan asked as Carl finished decorating. It will all clean up in seconds, since I'm just putting it back in inventory. They don't have an open-air market here, apparently, and this is what they found for us to set up shop. We will just sell what the locals need for a few hours and then call it a night. One fight a day, cleaning up the leftover monsters across the islands, should be more than enough work for the king to accept that we're not slacking. Carl joked. Prince Nathan laughed. If one major battle a day was the standard for not slacking, what was the rest of the world doing? Was that not called overworking yourself? But he didn't say that out loud. Instead, he took a moment to consider what the motivation behind the Darklight host wanting to fight so much and in so many places might be. Some of the answer was obviously to get materials for their crafting, and that was an honorable enough endeavor. However, he didn't think that was the primary reason. Do you always fight that much? He asked carefully. Well, not all of us. I have to spend most of my time crafting or meeting with people. However, Lady Ray certainly loves to be a dungeon, and every raid team needs golem mages and healers, so it's a bit hard for the ladies to escape. Carl agreed. Plus, they're a little bit bloodthirsty. Thor and I, we're the peaceful and gentle ones, you see. The ladies are the ones to watch out for. Even Lotus. Don't underestimate the level of ferocity that a tiny green dragon priestess can exhibit if someone steals her snacks or her cuddle bear. Remy laughed, while Prince Nathan looked bemused. She still sleeps with a stuffed toy? No, her cuddle bear is her girlfriend Ophelia, the werbear berserker. I believe that you met her earlier. Nathan nodded. I see now. He didn't, but 2 seconds later he did. And the expression of realization that he made was enough to make Ray laugh out loud. Let's call in the shoppers so that they don't cry at the delay. I've got everything that we need on display, and in a full array of color themes. Remy had an assortment of potions out as well, but Carl was somewhat limited in what he could put out, as they didn't have much mythic gear to begin with, and the last stop had purchased everything that he put out. He was really going to have to take some time to make more. Fortunately, there were totem and overlord ranked weapons in abundance, and those were always the second best in sales next to accessories. Shoppers flooded into the store when one of the dragons of the local guard unlocked the door, giving Carl just enough time to start his sales pitch. No fighting or cutting in line, or you will be refused service. Please form one line along the left, but feel free to pass by stands that don't have what you need. From your left to right, we have alchemical goods, rune-crafted equipment and fashion, which includes leather armor. He had to include that, since people didn't realize it was an option last time. The crowd surged forward, and the concept of lines basically vanished as they crowded every side of the tables. But there were barriers over the potions and rune-crafted goods, so that nobody accidentally injured themselves. Guild leader, what is this green stone? The label says it's a fertility charm, but it appears to be monarch ranked. One of the locals asked. That's right. It's a monarch ranked fertility charm. We sell many of them to matchmakers and midwives. The activation has 2 functions. One helps encourage successful procreation. The other grants a healing buff and divine blessing for childbirth. They are not inexpensive, but they work. The man looked skeptical, but an old woman reached out to inspect it. Carl picked it up, moving it through the barrier so she could properly inspect it. Made by a monarch-ranked druid and a lower-level sculptor? I don't know these runes, but it's definitely druidic healing magic in this nature stone. Just how effective is this stone? She asked. Would you like to have children? We can make that happen. Carl asked. The old lady laughed. That sounds about right for a mythic-ranked fertility charm, but I get your point. If there is a chance, this should nearly guarantee it. How is the birthing side of the charm? It should create a druidic healing spell at monarch rank for as long as it's active. So, with the help of a midwife, it should keep most births safe. I will take it. She handed Carl a sack of coins, and then another old woman in robes that were more patches and repairs than original cloth also handed him a sack of elemental stones. I need one of those as strong as you've got. For reasons. She whispered, her voice betraying her, as it was much younger than the elderly appearance that she was using. Carl looked in the bag, and handed her a totem-ranked fertility charm. The young woman cackled with joy, and Carl felt a hint of divine magic on her, as if he had done something that pleased her god. Only, he could tell that she was not a nature-related cleric at all. She began forcing her way through the crowd when the midwife recovered from her joyful inspection of her purchase and grabbed her by the robes. "Oh no, you don't. I'm not letting a servant of the laughing god run off with a fertility charm." The old lady wheezed, but the young woman just laughed as she let her disguise fade and the robe pull off her shoulders. That left her topless in the store while she ran out, then opened a portal to vanish from sight. "Kara will be mad she missed that," Ray joked. "I'm watching. This is going to be awesome." Chapter 1462. All our customers. Are you not going to do something about that? The sea elves of the Laughing God's cult are a menace to society, and certainly not allowed to shop at any respectable store. Prince Nathan muttered. Carl shrugged. The Darklight host has no such rule. If she thinks that it will be funny for someone to get very, very pregnant, she's probably not wrong. It's druidic magic. It won't give them more children than nature encourages. What's the worst that could happen? Hundreds of horrible options went through the prince's mind. But dragons had naturally low reproductive rates, so even if she did cause a scandal, it would still mean more eggs. The real issue would be if she used it on another species. The elves also had low birth rates, so she could be using it on her shipmates. Or she could be using it on the dwarves living to the south of the border, or even a random monster species. Remy patted him on the shoulder while he began to panic, and pulled him behind her stall so he was out of the way of the shoppers. Relax. 90% odds are on her using it to reveal someone's infidelity. The other 10% are on her using it on a succubus to see if they really can exercise themselves to death. The prince stared in shock at the young Naga queen. What sort of logic was that? A middle-aged dwarf at the potion counter laughed. I'm with the Naga. That woman is going to use it to embarrass someone in public. Her cult is escorting goods back and forth between here and Karb. They show up in the city all the time, but they're mostly harmless. However, they love to gossip, and the juicier the gossip the better. You should see them with my mother at the tavern. A few of the dragons gave him disgusted looks for the admission that he willingly served the clergy of the god of practical jokes and pranks. But the dwarf wasn't wrong. They all gossiped like bored old ladies. Carl smiled at the tavern keeper. Did you know that there are worlds where the laughing god controls the system? The man shuddered. That's a terrifying thought. The world dragon system gives us enough grief. Can you imagine what sort of quests you would get from a system controlled by the laughing god? Nathan was about to add something. Then he noticed that everyone in the room was listening intently for the gossip. Perhaps the laughing god's clergy weren't quite as eccentric as they seemed. I can't say that I have any experience with that, but I met an immortal from the Darklight host who gave me many insights into how the Pantheon operates on other mortal worlds. Carl added. Oh, now that is interesting. So, when you advance, you might have friends who can help you settle in? That would be a wonderful thing. One of the local nobles noted. Carl hadn't thought of that. He could go to the Darklight host on an immortal world after he advanced. That would let him continue to grow, but it would also give him a support system that would help him settle in and adapt to whatever the rules were in the immortal planes. Well, I've got some time before that. The journey to immortality isn't a short one, and I'm hardly old enough to be called a proper adult. If the dragons had known that he was born a human, they would have laughed themselves silly at his assertion, but they all thought that he was either a greater demon or a world dragon, as he had been introduced as Avatar of the World Dragon. Either of those would explain reaching mythic rank in early adulthood. While they made jokes, Carl accepted payment for a few more items, ones that nobody saw the need to haggle over. They weren't cheap, but they were the sort of thing that wasn't usually available anywhere else, so if they upset Carl, and he decided not to sell to them, there wouldn't likely be another chance to obtain them. That made the shoppers much more reasonable, and the same was true at Remy's stand. Only on Ray's side, where the ladies wanted bulk discounts for large clothing purchases, were things getting chaotic. As always, the clothing was their highest volume sales item, and it didn't matter that much of it was lower grade items but Ray's standard. It was stylish, and made of high enough quality materials for them to show it off without fear of accidentally damaging it. If they weren't attacked by a monster or a skill, there was little chance that even a commander-rank silk dress would be damaged during casual wear. At worst, it might be stained, but seldom ripped or frayed. You could just open a chain of clothing shops all over the Dragon Isles and make a fortune every month. I can't believe how popular her fashion line is. Prince Nathan whispered to Remy as he watched the people shop. This is nothing. She's not bringing out the really good stuff today because it's out of the budget of the shoppers. If she had epic-grade mythic rank dresses with actual bonuses on them, can you imagine the bidding war? Remy's voice was low, but there were still a few alchemy shoppers nearby that heard her words. Indeed, it was a good thing that the Spider Woman was not offering such goods for sale today. There might actually be a riot here in Byrad where true luxury goods were rare, and the high fashions of the capital were things from magazines, not daily life. Then, the dwarves discovered the hair regrowth serum. No longer was the clothing side the only side in chaos, it was more of the ladies' side of the chaos, while Carl's rune-crafted accessories were the island of calm in between two seas of insane customers only restrained from physical combat by his rules against fighting in the store. Chapter 1463 Bring Them In. The chaos continued in the store until well after dark, when the last of the shoppers returned to their homes, in advance of the city's imposed curfew. It had been placed to keep everyone safe from the crocolisk attacks, in case something made it past the guards, and it hadn't been lifted yet. It would most likely stay in effect for a few more days, but Prince Nathan realized that it posed an issue for Carl and the others. Are you going to sleep here in the warehouse? Or is everyone moving to your hidden space? He asked. Carl shrugged. I don't see a reason we can't all go to the tiny world. I will just leave someone on watch in case there is an attack and we're needed. It wouldn't do for us to be out of contact when we're actually in the city during an attack. The chances that they would be needed were low but never zero. At least not with Carl's luck. The other dragons of their traveling group, who hadn't gotten to experience the tiny world the night before when the prince was evacuated for his safety, waited impatiently to see what sort of hidden space Carl had obtained. Remy was even more eager than they were. The tiny world always shocked people when they first saw it. Especially dragons, who couldn't fathom a hidden space so large that they could comfortably fly around or sun themselves on a mountain face. Carl opened a portal to the tiny world, which was already well past dark, as he had synced the time zones to Drod. But the dragons would be able to see well enough in the dark. Please, make yourself comfortable. There is plenty of room in the house, or you can sleep in dragon form on a ledge. It won't rain tonight, Carl informed them. Why would it rain inside? What is this place? Pretty cool, right? This is my tiny world. It's got nearly everything that you could need for a good rest. I only ask that you don't harass the residents. This is their home, and you are guests, despite the rank advantage. Why do I sense dragon eggs? One of the clerics asked. We have a small orphanage here. They're preparing for the hatching of some orphaned eggs from another continent. Their parents were lost in combat, so they remain in my care. Carl explained. Naksha tried not to laugh at Carl's version of events. But she did wonder if the death god's insistence that he should not be allowed to have a baby dragon was because there was one in this clutch that was destined to follow him. It made sense to her, as the god of death wasn't a god of carnage or genocide, but ensured that there was a sufficient death toll to maintain the balance of the known worlds. And if the death toll got a little bit higher than sustainable, that's what the nature gods were for, right? The dragons looked around the dark space, then decided it was too late to go exploring, so they simply moved to the house and picked an empty bedroom on the second floor, which was set up the same as the Drod Guild house with small dorm-style rooms and a common shower. This is nice. All the amenities, workspace for the crafters, and I can smell both lakes and mountain air. How long did it take to make this? One of the shadow dragons asked. Since I was an overlord, I suppose. I've been slowly upgrading it over time, and now it's reaching the limits of what I can do at mythic rank. But there are still a few tweaks that I can make. My understanding of the fundamental rules has improved since I last altered the space, so it could be a bit more complete, you see. The dragon shrugged. It's already more complete than my understanding, so I couldn't tell. Is there a reason that all the beds have mythic rank silk sheets on them? Someone asked from the other side of the room. We asked Lady Ray if we could put flannel sheets on, and the request was denied. Lotus joked from the top of the stairs. Ray shrugged. It should have been obvious. For one, there is no winter here. Why would you need flannel sheets? For two, just no. Prince Nathan winked at Lotus. You heard the spider. Silk sheets are non-optional, no matter how much static your cuddlebear's fur generates. Ray shook her head. Ye of little faith. Simply removing the static response to fur is far too easy. I am well beyond such simple nuisances. As if speaking of her had summoned her, Ophelia appeared behind Lotus and picked the cleric up around the middle to take her back to bed before she could get all worked up and fully awake again. That's our cue. Everyone find somewhere comfortable to sleep. I have a pair of guards on duty for the evening. Prince Nathan did a quick head count. Who did you send out? Kara, the Chaos Badger, and Tion, the Stonefur Divine Fox. They'll watch the warehouse for the evening, and nothing will get by them. Plus, they're happy to help, and they will call for us as soon as there is trouble. Well, Tion would. Kara would wait 5 minutes, just to let the suspense build. Maybe 10. Unfortunately for Carl, he wasn't going to get to go straight to bed. There were items to be made before their next stop, if they were going to keep trying to build up the reputation of the Darklight host, and possibly build enough goodwill that they could start another branch. Simply moving some of their crafters and purchasing a house would satisfy the system requirements, but that was unbecoming of the guild. They needed customers and an impressive enough reputation that the other branches didn't have to come clean up problems for them. A few mythic crafters would be a good start, but a few mythic crafters and a reputation for supporting the people in their new home would be much better. Chapter 1464 Naive Fox. The first project that Carl had for the evening was to make a new set of jewelry at the mythic rank. Mostly because the random stat bonuses were simply too random, and there were so many that it was nearly impossible to get just the ones that you wanted. Carl knew where to start, though. There were only 3 basic archetypes for gear that he really needed to stock to keep 8 out of 10 members happy. And he would have almost all of them. If he stocked strength, attack damage, and attack speed together on items, the warriors would eat it up. The same with the mana regeneration, casting speed, and spell damage for mages. Then the mana cost reduction, mana regeneration, and healing effect bonus for the clerics, and you had the majority of mythic gear covered. The final one was the least requested, but the most important. Tank gear. Damage reduction, more damage reduction, and regeneration. Or, he could swap some of the damage reduction for extra strength to add to their skill damage, which also helped many warrior-class defensive skills. The rare few left over were the rogues, agility warriors, and some of the specialty casters. Rogue classes were rare among the dragons, Carl had noticed. He wasn't sure if it was a species affinity thing or cultural, but there were far more among the demons and humans than there were here in Gthuzan. The warriors got their equipment first, as there were so many more of them than anyone else, and Carl gave silent thanks that he had learned to use earth manipulation to carve stone. This way, he didn't have to write everything by hand once he knew that the layout was going to work. He just had to use the spell to carve it as he added the mana, and then finalize the runecrafting to complete the item. It was still a tiring process, but it was significantly faster than the old method, and he could make 2 or more items an hour depending on the complexity. 5 items an hour that night, as he was going for the simple and direct route with no added spell effects, which were 10 times as many runes as simply adding the stat bonuses. Only when he was sure that he had enough for their next stop did Carl slow down and make a few specialty items with a spell effect on them. Limited invulnerability for some of the tank items as the skill was rare, and unholy corrosion on a few mage items to give lingering damage over time that was immune to holy element healing. They were dirty and brutal bonuses, but having 2 of each would let him sell one and offer another if the right person happened to be desperate for it. There was no better way to make new allies than to have the things that they needed, and alliances could quickly turn into friendships under the right conditions. Carl worked late into the night, and then curled up on his bed with Dana, waiting for either the morning light to wake them, or someone to call about an attack. In the end, it was neither. The smell of Lotus making breakfast was what woke them up, and then when they opened the soundproof door, the noise of dozens of excited dragons eager to explore the tiny world after sampling whatever the green dragon priestess was making. Mystic cooking and dragons were inseparable. As soon as you started, the lure of magic and food together would inevitably draw them to you. So, it was no shock to see that the kitchen and main floor dining room were packed. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I will head out after breakfast to speak with the city guards and the relief force, but you are all free to explore the tiny world at your leisure. If you wish to remain here all day, that is also fine. I can call everyone out once we reach our next stop. Carl announced. Really? You can just travel with a whole army of dragons tucked away? One of the clerics asked. Well, it is a separate space, there's really no reason why I couldn't. In fact, having more people here is good for the environment. Dragons radiate magic just by existing, and that helps balance and grow the ecosystem. In that case, we will accept your kindness. This place seems to be quite luxurious, and the mana density here is perfect for meditation and growth. The dragons all indicated their agreement, except for Prince Nathan, who was clearly obsessed with the concept of a raspberry chocolate chip pancake. Lotus had offered it to him with both syrup and caramel, and the plate of sweet and fruity breakfast had his full attention. At least, it did until he realized that as the prince, he needed to tell the guards that he was leaving so that they could take over command. They had arrived on his orders, and they would remain here on them as well, unless he gave them permission to leave when the area was secure and the city guards had recovered. But that was a problem for after-breakfast Nathan. Hungry Nathan was certain such issues could wait. The others couldn't help but admire his dedication. But once they tried the food, Lotus' favorite breakfast option, they too were hooked. And that would be unfortunate for them because raspberries were not native to Gthuzan. Carl finished his meal and stood to leave the tiny world. I will let you all finish, but I need to go make sure that Kara and Tion haven't fallen asleep or run off to do something fun. Hey, I wouldn't slack off on my duties like that, even if Kara told you that there were fluffy foxkin girls in need of moral support while they stood watch for the night. Well, that's what I thought. You're still a young fox, not wise enough to the ways of the Kara. But if you're still in the warehouse, it's fine. We're actually across the street, there is a vendor selling breakfast. Sandwiches. Ones with egg and carrot and cabbage. So weird. But somehow, tasty. And that proved that the fox could be talked into nearly anything if you did it, right? Chapter 1465 Responsible Pair. When Carl left the tiny world, he found that there was a pair of city guards waiting outside the empty store, waiting for him to appear. They clearly hadn't noticed that Kara and Tion had been watching the area for the night. But that mystery was quickly solved when Carl realized that the two were in beast form for most of the evening, and only Kara had transformed to get breakfast, so that Tion could use the patented puppy eyes to get them a discount. Not that they were short on money, Kara just didn't believe in paying full price for anything if she could avoid it. Guild leader, good morning. Will the others be along soon? The guard asked. A few of them. The others intend to travel in the separate space for the day. What is the situation around the city? Stable. There were a few crocolisks sighted and eliminated during the evening, but no concerted attacks. Most of the city guard have recovered enough to resume their shifts on the walls, but the commander is advising that we remain on station for at least 72 hours, with additional time if there are deployments necessary. Carl nodded. All right, the prince will be out in a few minutes, and he will confirm all the orders and deployments for your unit. I don't see any issue with your timeline, but he might have some insight that I do not. Where is your group planning to go next? We heard that you are just passing through on tour to eliminate the remaining beasts from the invasion. I'm not entirely certain yet. However, the closest options would be Narukther in Zindab or Bral, southwest of here still in Gathuzan. Both are on this map as having an invasion that wasn't completely contained, so they should both be options for today's mission. Do you have more information than the sheet does? The guard shook his head. Not much. I know that the attack in Narukther was responded to by the Dark Lady, but wasn't completely contained because she was called away to another attack. But other than that, I don't know much more than what's on the documents. I was busy up to the north during the initial wave of attacks. I was originally stationed at a road safety stop, but we were all recalled after the attack. The roads in this region are all closed anyhow, and the farms have been evacuated. It sounds like things will take some time to get back to normal, even with the majority of the crocolisks gone. Carl noted, but the guard just shrugged. Not much gets farmed out here anyhow. Mostly magical herbs from the swamps, but those are still being picked, just at a slower pace. The farm teams that they've still got are just going out during the day to go get them. It might not be as efficient, but it's still getting enough of them into town to keep most of the shops supplied, and that's what really matters. All right, as long as you think that the city will be able to keep things operational after we leave. It's not impossible for us to hang around an extra day and keep fighting, but it would be better if we went somewhere that needs such a large force to deal with a major infestation. The relief unit soldier chuckled. An infestation is a good word for what it is. An invasive species infestation. The other dragon, who had been silent until now, nodded with his chin toward something across the street. The guards are going for seconds at the sandwich stall. He muttered. You know, they can understand us just fine. If you had needed anything, they would have transformed so they could talk to you. The man nodded. I figured it was easier to just wait. It's been a long couple of weeks, and I'm not up to trying to negotiate with a badger. Understandable. When she has to keep watch for the night, she tends to get bored, even if she has someone to keep her company. Besides, Tion is shy, so he doesn't say much. The soldiers definitely did not believe that. Those two beasts had been in some sort of animated conversation for most of the night, though they were communicating silently with each other. If that was what shy looked like, they weren't sure that they could handle outgoing. Or perhaps the description simply didn't apply to his interactions with the badger, as they appeared to be raised together. The guards weren't aware of the exact nature of Carl's skills, only that he was the one that the beasts answered to. Prince Nathan exited the space with Ray, who already had an annoyed look on her face that said she had been informed of possible delays in her acquisition of additional corpses. There were few offenses more serious than that in her mind, but Byrad wasn't in the best shape, and they could still use the help getting rid of the remaining crocolisks. Your Highness, if you approve it, we are recommending 3 days on station before we move on. Starting after our men have rested, we will go on missions to clear the area, and that should be sufficient to bring the monster population back under control. Ray smiled. Perhaps they were going to get to do something fun today after all. Prince Nathan took out his copy of the deployment map and stared at the options. All right, I suggest that we head for Bral. They had a rather unique issue this time. They got an invasion of hippos, which isn't shocking given that almost all the invaders were aquatic to some extent. But they didn't attack at all. They simply refused to leave, and they're eating everything. Ray snorted with laughter. Did you try asking them? Unfortunately, we do not have anyone available who speaks hippo. But the gist of the answer was no. Hopefully hippos were tasty. Chapter 1466 Naming Sense. Your Highness, would you like to fly directly to Bral with me? We can let the others rest a bit longer, and descend when we see the herd. Carl suggested. Unfortunately, I have been requested to attend a luncheon with the nature priestess and a whelpling named Button. I really do need to speak to that girl's parents. Who names a dragon Button? Kara laughed, while Ray just shrugged. She's a forest dragon. They're all hippies. Still, It's like naming your child Flower or Petal. Or Opal. Kara joked. The butterfly's exasperation was clear through the link. Opal is the perfect name. Look at my wings. What do they look like? Tian nodded. She has a point. Her wings look like opals but transparent. Plus, she's Carl's daughter. So Opal Carlsdaughter is the perfect name for her. Wait, does that make me Tian Carlson? Do I actually need 2 names? Pretty sure it's optional. I don't use one. Thor doesn't use one. Ray picked one of her own. Kara informed him. Oh, that's a relief. The 2 just didn't go together. Well, if you're going to a luncheon, I will let the beasts return to their space, and I will make the flight alone. That might actually be an advantage, as I will more easily be able to sneak up on the monsters than a whole wing of dragons. Carl decided. You know that you're huge, right? A mythic world dragon isn't sneaking up on anything capable of looking up. Hey, I'm capable of being stealthy. I can transform into a Tengu and fly. Carl countered. He could also fly in cat demon form, but that was an entirely different skill. Prince Nathan sighed. Whatever you think is best. It's a cloudy day, so you could likely get away with staying a dragon. As long as you have a way to see through the cloud cover. That I do. If there are mythic beasts beneath me, I won't miss them, no matter how high I am flying. Go ahead and attend your luncheon. I will call for everyone when I am there. Ray took the prince back to the tiny world, while Kara and Tian finished their breakfast, then switched locations to get a second breakfast out of Lotus. It really was worth taking the night watch sometimes. The pair of dragons shook their heads in dismay. What a pair. That little fox is so young. But the amount of holy magic that he radiates is astounding. He's growing exceptionally well, I agree. I just worry that his power is getting ahead of his body. He's still only half grown, but he's so far through the mythic rank. The Stonefur Divine Fox isn't meant to reach the peak of mythic rank until they are adults. Carl agreed. The dragon shrugged. It's the same with prodigies in the dragon species. They grow faster in power than they rightfully should, but it won't harm them. They eventually reach a bottleneck and their growth slows until their body can keep up. But really, Carl was more concerned about what would happen when someone reached the immortal rank. Both Ray and Kara had complete or close to complete understandings of a fundamental rule. If their bodies reached the bottleneck, it was entirely possible that they would trigger the immortal rank tribulation without warning. Good luck, gentlemen. I will head out as soon as I reach the edge of the city. Carl offered. Not going to just fly from here? Carl shrugged. I could fly up and then transform, but there isn't space for me to shift into dragon form in the street. The pair nodded, assuming that his cat demon form was a disguise to hide his true age, and turned to follow him to the edge of the city. I hear that the Darklight host is intending to make friends all over the Western Islands this trip. Any particular reason? Now they were on to the important questions, once they could make them sound more like idle chat than an interrogation. We were thinking of having a new branch house founded by some of our higher-ranked craftsmen. If we transferred a few totems and a myth to a new guild house, they could establish a presence on the Western Islands for trade and recruit more craftsmen. Our Drod guild house is getting quite full, you see, and Xylaz isn't a true guild house, just an alliance house that doesn't grant additional members, even if it allows guild bank access from a greater distance. Carl explained. That would certainly be a welcome change for whatever city you set up in. We've seen what your craftsmen are capable of, and we would welcome them anywhere in Gthuzan. Carl nodded. I thought as much. Mostly, the decision will be on the craftsmen that we transfer, but I have a few places in Gthuzan that I would recommend, that they consider. Who knows, if our next stop is an interesting one, it might also be a spot for them to consider. The soldiers laughed. That is if you can convince the hippos to go away. That one was the strangest invasion ever, but the damage they're doing to the plant life while trying to get enough sustenance for such large herbivores is really concerning the local guards. Not that they would trade it for the hippos assaulting their walls, but they still need to eat. Do they at least taste good? The dragon shrugged. You'll have to ask them. I think they've mostly been on a live and let live policy, so I'm not certain whether anyone has even tried it yet. Some of the mythic beasts are surprisingly tasty, though. The frog legs have been a huge hit everywhere that got them. That they were. Drod was loving them, as were the warriors from Xylaz who had come to help out during the battle. Even with a bounty on them, most had chosen to keep at least a few for themselves, just for the sake of stocking their guild's freezer. Chapter 1467 Hippo Herd. Carl flew west out of the city, gaining altitude so that he didn't scare anything on the ground. Not that there was much to see. After the invasion, the number of monsters in the region had been so high that everyone who could retreat to the safety of a walled city had done so, and they weren't particularly interested in hurrying back home to find out what the damages looked like. Especially not when the damages were done by something multiple ranks higher than themselves. Most of the rural areas were worked by dragonkin here, and while they were strong by the standard of the Golden Dragon Nation, Nowhere in the Dragon Isles would call them that with a straight face. Royal-ranked adults were barely considered tolerable, after all. Bral was over 300 kilometers from Byrad, and up in the hills, but apparently the hippos didn't mind that they weren't right on the river. However, the further he flew, the more that Carl realized that the region was incredibly densely populated. There were a dozen cities with tens of thousands of people in them, and one looked to be close to 100,000 as he flew over. Surely, this region could have dealt with the hippos if they had wanted to. Their combined population was more than the capital, and Carl could sense that there were dozens of mythic dragons in each of the cities. But they hadn't. That was somewhat suspicious, as the people of Byrad had been clear that the hippos were eating everything that grew in the region where they had arrived. So the locals should have done something to take care of the issue. Bral should be the furthest west of this cluster of cities, according to the map, but it was not the change in population that told Carl he was in the right spot. It was the lack of vegetation. The hippos really had come through and eaten everything, pulling up plants by the roots in many spots and leaving little more than bare dirt. However, they were no longer next to the city, and he didn't see stragglers, so this must be some sort of herd animal, unlike the hippos that Carl knew from picture books. Those were portrayed as solitary creatures. Carl continued to fly high over the region, looking for the source of the damage, but only continued to see more stripped fields, barren former grasslands, and rocky hills. From this altitude, all he could see was a wave of destruction spreading west from Bral, but no sign of what caused it. No, there was an edge to the cloud of dust, and he could see trees to the northwest. So that was where Carl flew next, looking for the actual hippos. As he got closer to the river, the glow of mythic rank souls became clear, and 1,000 creatures basking in the water marked the edge of the destruction. He had found them, but he had also found the reason that nobody was messing with them. The hippos weren't operating alone. They operated as a herd. With 1,000 of them in the same spot, it was suicide to attack them on the ground, and even a flight of dragons might not do much to them, depending on what sort of powers they had. That was something that he should determine before he went to talk to the others. Engaging this herd in the open would be a mess, and there had to be a good reason why nobody had tried. Especially when there used to be farms all over these hills before the hippos had passed through. Starting with the simple things, Carl cast Meteor, and let the flaming ball of metal crash into the herd from above, while remaining safely above the cloud cover himself, well away from where the spell had originated. The meteor hurtled toward them, but when it got 100 meters from the hippos, a shimmering blue barrier formed over the herd. They had a group water barrier effect that stacked into one impenetrable wall of power. That was why nobody was hunting them. Unless you could overpower 1,000 mythic beasts at a time, you couldn't get through their barriers to cause any damage at all. They might have to just class this as a natural disaster. Technically, Carl and Kara could go down with Nullify and attack the hippos. They would most likely be able to poke holes in the barrier and take out individual group members. Or, Carl transformed into Tengu form and flew down a few hundred meters from the herd. If he could isolate some, it would be easy enough to eliminate them once they were out of the barrier. His plan was to walk a bit closer until they got curious, and see if he could lure some of them away from the herd without alerting the group. Then, he noticed something strange. The grass around the river had been pulled up, like the grass everywhere else, but it was already growing back. The closer to the water, and to the herd, the faster that the plant life was regrowing. Had they pulled up everything trying to get water? Because from what he could see, now that they had it, the herd had stopped, as had the rampant property damage. This territory might be hippo territory now, but from what he could tell, there might not be any need for them to keep moving. If their appetite wasn't extreme, then in a few weeks this whole area would be regrown, and they could just stay by the river and feed. Bringing magical beasts out of their native territory for an attack left many of them in poor conditions, and the immortal beasts hadn't cared where they had dropped anything, other than the creatures that could only survive in water. If he had to guess, the plan was to push this herd through a dozen cities before they reached the swamps, where they would be happy. That would actually be a better spot for them, though the residents of Byrad would not be happy if he added a whole herd of hippos to their crocolisk. Problem. Hello everyone, this is Shadow. Due to copyright restrictions on YouTube, I can't publish many of the audiobooks you love. That's why I've created a special paid service where you can enjoy over 300 high-quality audiobooks from platforms like Webnovel, Pocket FM, Audible, Wuxia, and more. Each novel comes as a one-time purchase, no subscriptions, no hidden fees. After payment, you'll receive full access via Telegram, along with all future updates for that novel. You'll find a wide selection of your favorite genres and titles, always in premium audio quality. Check the full list of available novels in the description. DM me now to get your favorite stories in audiobook form and start listening today.